Yeah, I think virtual lists really shine in like the custom report element. Like you're designing a layout that's FileMaker specific, and you need to customize this data in a very specific format. Virtual list is just like seems like the best route to go.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, so today we're talking about virtual lists. I feel like virtual lists are something that come around every, I don't know, few years or so. It's kind of like those, trends in other industries where like everybody seems into it, and then something else comes along, and then everybody years later says, "Oh yeah, virtual lists are pretty awesome." And then it comes back to virtual lists. So it's something that's talked about for short periods, but I really feel like there's a lot of utility and a lot of use for virtual lists. So I try to stay in it as much as I can when necessary, obviously. Um, but it's not something that I really think to use like every day. It's usually, of course, for reporting because it's really good at reporting purposes. But then virtual lists can be used for pickers, and I don't know if anybody else can think of any other scenarios for virtual lists. But that's typically what I use them for: reports and pickers. Um, but I'm sure there's all sorts of like utility for it. Uh, So virtual lists, just as a quick rundown, virtual lists are a way to, uh, it's a table that has as much of unstored calculations that uh, you use to build some sort of global or global JSON or using repeating lists. There are a few different ways to do it. But the uncalculated or the unstored calculations are pulling data from that global variable into view, and then you can build whatever you want from that, build whatever interface you want based off of those global variables. So as long as you populate the global variables in whatever way you want, you can display that data in a very usable way, still based on FileMaker restraints, but still in a way that gets past, especially if you're doing table or data from multiple tables or external data or calculated data that you don't necessarily want to store in the fields. It's a good way to calculate those values on the fly, store them in the variables, and then you can display them on however you want. So we'll start with layouts because I really feel like the layout is kind of the easiest part of virtual lists. Your tables are pretty straightforward. You've got in this instance we're using JSON to store the data that we're going to display. And so these fields, like I said, are calculation fields that are unstored, and they're just they're expecting a value to exist. This is the data that's going to exist in the row. And so there's an array that holds that data. So it's getting a repetition from the calculation. And then the array row is looking at this global variable, as you can see, and just expecting data to be in it. So pretty straightforward. As long as you can build that array based off of your ID, you've got data in a report. So it's pretty easy once you look at the basis of the structure of from the FileMaker's perspective.
You talked about how long it's been around, and it's here in Seattle, knowing it was actually a technique that was created and popularized by Bruce Robertson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, way back in the day. I haven't seen him in a long time, but used to be a regular attendee at the FMP Pug group here in Seattle. So yeah, it's kind of nice to know him. Really, really smart guy. Yeah. Made some incredible, huge impact in FileMaker in the early days, definitely. So
yeah,
cool to give a shout out to him.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen him in a long time.
So I don't have a lot of experience with these, so I'm kind of wrapping my head around all the fields here. So the array row is stored as a JSON element itself, which is then, I guess, pulling from that JSON.vl global.
Correct.
And you're getting it based on an ID field. And then each cell text row is another get from that array row field. So I guess JSON.vl is like nested JSON objects.
Yes.
Okay, and then I forget. Can you refresh me on what extend function is? I don't remember what extend does.
How we're using it here. So like I'll kind of show you. So we're basically just extending. This is the non-repeating field, and we're just extending it by whatever, or not extend. It's getting the value of that non-repeating field. So
so extend is like another way of like evaluate, kind of.
Another way of like get repetition.
Oh, okay.
It's a way to allow you to work with non-repeating fields with repeating fields.
Yes.
Right. So if you need them to interact, because otherwise, if you didn't use extend, the non-repeating field value would only apply to the first field repetition in your calculation.
Oh, got it. Okay.
To quote the FileMaker documentation, extend allows a value in a non-repeating field to be used with every repetition in a repeating field.
And so each of those cell text fields are repeats. And then so you're saying extend it to entry 13 or whatever entry value you give it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, so that's kind of your basic structure, right? You've got a number of cells are going to be either text or numbers or dates or however you want to define them. And then those are like, these are repetitions, these for the dates, numbers. And so you would just pull that data into the field based off of the global variable. And all of the data for that row is going to be stored in one field. So this is the field that pulls the data from the global object, a global variable, and then each cell grabs its specific part out of that array. So as long as you have data in this array row, you have data populating in the cells. If there is no data in this array row, then there is no data to populate. So when you actually need to build the report and show, the final interface, all you have to do is perform a find for this array row for anything in that array row field, and that's what displays to the user. So, kind of a nice way to handle that. With virtual lists, you always have to make sure you have enough records in the table to populate the data that's going to display. So if you have 1,000 rows in your JSON VL global, you need to make sure you have 1,000 records in that virtual list table. And so we've got some very generic scripts that say, verify that we have the number of records needed for this report. So say there are 1,500 records found for that report. The script, you pass in the 1,500 to the script, and then it goes and verifies that there are 1,500 records in that table. So pretty straightforward. It does not delete records because we typically don't need to delete records if it's not going to, if we don't need them to show on the report. But there are times where deleting records out of the table, it might be necessary. But for the most part, FileMaker handles 1,000 records in a virtual list table just fine. So now, if you get into like the 10 to 20,000 range and up, then you'll want to think about how you're gonna chunk up that data to display in the virtual list. But that's for another conversation. I don't know is anybody actually dealing with that much data in a report right now, or in any solutions? I mean, that's all I know for that. There's that one, but we're using external services to store that much data, right? Like we're using like a node server to parse all that.
I mean, I don't think it's running anymore, but it was in FileMaker. Everything, all the data was being stored in FileMaker.
Oh wow.
Just as JSON text, though. So basically, FileMaker now has what they call JSON L, and then a lot of other people used to call it ND-JSON.
Gotcha.
But it's basically just a text array.
Okay.
That's pretty much all it is.
Okay. All right. Cool. Okay. So that's really all I have for the basics of virtual lists. The nice thing about implementing a virtual list is, for the most part, it's plug and play. You can copy it in from a solution, and then build your scripting to populate that global variable, and you're ready to go. So it makes for a pretty easy integration if you just need to get a report up and running fairly quickly.
Can you show one of the scripts to build the build the JSON array, maybe?
And I'll go through the script. So it's a normal FileMaker script. They're not doing anything crazy. We're verifying some required stuff. And then we're setting up our globals for the globals necessary to do some selector type reporting, for things. And then here's where we start getting into virtual lists. So first thing we want to do is define our column names, right? So in the virtual list, because there's a field that's defined as the header, we're defining what our column names are, and that's pretty straightforward. We're just doing some pipe delimited values for what the column names are going to look like. And because it's in a virtual list, we can name them whenever we want. We could use, field names for the actual solution, but because it's a virtual list, we're just going to hard code them in there. And then here's where we have the part of the report that's a SQL query that gathers the data what we want. The SQL query is pretty intense. So we're doing a lot of joins. So we're getting a table name. We're defining all of our joins, up here. But because this is a virtual list, like I said, we don't really have to worry about exactly how we get the data. If we wanted to, we could just do a typical find in a table and loop through the records. But for this solution, we needed to join a bunch of stuff in order to get certain data, to be connected. So we could do a SQL result and then take that result and put it into the virtual list. So this just does it all in one big SQL query. So once we have our result, or this is the actual building the statement. So for this example, we're running a SQL query on the server because, performance stuff, and then we're grabbing that result. And then all we have to do is grabbing the content of that result. We're counting the number of records, and then we're exporting that data into the virtual list table. So it's pretty straightforward from here. Since those variables are already built, we don't have to do anything except verify that there's the number of records that we need in the virtual list table, and then we're off to the races. The data is set, and all we're going to do is export it as a PD or as a Excel document. So it's kind of nice because that data is all in the table. We can do whatever we want with it. It can be a primitive report. It can export pretty easily because the headers are already defined, all that sort of stuff. So it makes it really malleable. In this other solution, we're doing a little bit more with it. So we're still doing the same thing. Let me pull up the table. We're still building that global variable. We're using the calculations to pull the data out from that array row. Pretty standard stuff. But the changes we made here are all on the display side. So we're doing a little bit of extra work. And so all we've added here is just some conditional formatting. So there's certain things that where certain conditions that set the conditional formatting of the field, and it's really just for highlighting the field. It's nothing crazy, but where there's a separate calculation that it's a nightly script that runs and sets a field based on a number of certain scenarios on what the client wanted, what the client wanted the colors to look like based on certain parameters, right? So all we're doing is taking the value that was stored in that field, and then changing the conditional formatting based on whatever that color is. So it's nothing crazy. All we're doing is literally just defining the color that the client decided on for each one. But what's nice is I'm pulling those into this virtual list table so we can actually use them and perform the conditional formatting based on whatever color it was. So still a little bit of hard coding, but it does make it easier to do conditional formatting in a virtual list environment if you have the scenario, the rules tightly set. And so if we look at the script, so a lot of it's very similar, but because this is a newer implementation of it, there's a lot more commenting and things like that. So I like to make sure we're setting up the element for the virtual list first, just because I know that everything is defined and I can be cleared quickly if I'm debugging, in whatever test scenario that I have. And then we're starting our index. A lot of people like to do a lot of this stuff in a single step, but I like to make sure everything's very verbose, because if I come back to this a year from now, I'm not going to remember half this stuff. And then here's where we're defining our column headers, and in this case, the report, it's all dates. So we're just counting out dates by weeks, counting out weeks by days, and then that's going to display in the header for each column. The client knew exactly how many columns they wanted to show on this report, and they knew exactly how far ahead they wanted the report to be. So it was pretty easy to set up the headers and columns the way they wanted. And then we get into building the actual data that's going to display. So we're getting some locations based on some value lists, and then we start a loop for each location, where this is going to be the first part of the report. And so it's going to a table, performing a find, and then we start building our arrays based on certain conditions. And so the value of that. And so in the previous example, we were doing a SQL query. In this example, we're doing a loop and setting up the array based on the found set. So pretty straightforward. Instead of looping to each record, we're using the whole get nth record, which I really like. I don't know if anybody uses that enough, but if you have to loop through records, don't actually loop through the records. Just use the get nth record for your found set, and that really speeds things up. Shannon taught me that one. That was a fantastic trick.
Yeah, that one is huge because you don't have to wait for all the screen rendering.
Mm-hmm. So from there on, all you're doing is building that JSON virtual list object. So I'm looping through, building or adding to that index, adding the key pairs to the index, and inside that there's another loop to get certain scenarios that you want certain records to be nested inside the original, and so those get nested inside this loop. So once it's done with that loop, then it goes back out and does a summary, and so the summary is showing underneath the inside loop of the first loop. So like I said, like if you can control your found sets to show, or because you can control your found sets, you can really show that data on a virtual list report in a really dynamic way. I mean, dynamic with quotes, right? Like it's not really dynamic. You're building it literally cell by cell, but you have a really good handle on what data is going to show on the report. or on the interface. Like this is really good for pickers too. So that's it. We've got all of our data, and then like I said, we're verifying that we have a number of records in the table, and I can show you this is a really simple script where it's just opening a utility window, going to that table, making sure it's counting the number of records, and it matches or is equal or greater than the records we need, and then if not, it just adds the records and increments the serials, right? Like nothing crazy. And then when we're done verifying the records, we just perform a find for everything in that array row. Like I said earlier, it's not, we don't have to get crazy with how we get that data, but just because we're populating the array row from the JSON, all you have to do is to find the records in that field. And then we're just, setting up Windows stuff and exiting out. It's pretty straightforward from there. These aren't extremely difficult. You just have to have a really good handle on how FileMaker loads that JSON data from the global variable, and then how the customer wants that to be built, because it can be really done a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah, question. Have you hit a setback with the size of the global variable?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Yeah, not yet. I know
The global variable is holding everything, right? I mean, all of the data that you collect. So if you're working with like 100,000 records.
right. And I would say, like, if you're parsing more than like 10,000 records, I would probably break it up into chunks. I think the most I've seen is like 400 to 500, like in that range of records.
Yeah.
And even then, because I'm chunking up the data and that array row is grabbing data that it needs to display for that row, it does that part pretty quick. But I think if you had to do a whole bunch of data all at once, it would be, I think results would vary.
You could do that. You could switch to doing some of the JSON parsing in the WebViewer, potentially if you had really large data chunks.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where I do like data tables for this sort of thing. So if you think about data tables in conjunction with virtual lists, data tables are really nice for an interface that is not a report, right? Like they're really good for showing data and interacting with data, where a user needs to do more than just print out a report or an export data, right? Like where the user needs to interact with it, or there's more CSS underneath that does conditional formatting, or all sorts of stuff. So a lot more usable interface.
I think this what is nice about this is, since you put it into JSON, it's fairly straightforward to turn it into a data table or turn it into some sort of a website display referencing it as JSON, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't even actually really have to work to do that, because AI does everything. So, but like seriously, if you gave it that as a sample of, here's the JSON object that I'm using for my virtual list, can you create a really nice dashboard with summary calcs, all kinds of stuff?
Yeah.
WebViewer with the data tables built in and all sorts of stuff. Like the hardest part is gathering the data that you're going to either use for a virtual list or pass into your large language model to give you that web page HTML and JavaScript code. So I think it works really easy because you've already done the work of gathering the data, that is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And the data is in a JSON format, so it's highly portable into other formats. I did have one question, and that was about the it looked like the global variable was being moved from one into another, and then there is, my only thought about that is there is a cost, and as Jacob was mentioning, having a really large global variable, what's your limit on those? And you could do those into a global field to store it, and then write it to that global field. So you don't have to use a global variable necessarily. And then it's not all, I don't know if it's handled in the same way by FileMaker, but you could write it to a record and store it as a record, and then that would give you really quick access to jump back to it without having to rebuild that virtual list.
Yeah. To that point, I was actually just looking this up. The global variables are limited to 30,000 characters.
Yeah.
Which could get chewed up pretty quickly if you have multiple entries to each JSON record, right? But the text fields themselves have a 10 million character limit. So moving it to a global field instead of a global variable, if you needed to, would probably be the best option.
Yeah, and then to expand on that 10 million character limit, you can do you can have the field have multiple what is it called? We were just talking about it with the extend function and what that was used for. You can do repetitions in there, and then daisy chain the repetitions together. So each repetition, well, you don't have to add another field on the to your actual schema. You can just say like 20 repetitions, right? And then you can daisy chain those all together, and each one of those can hold 10, like you said, 10 million characters. Mm-hmm. So that's how you can achieve millions and millions of characters beyond the limit without having to add a bunch of fields to store them all in. You can just do it in one field, but using the repetition and then daisy chain them. I've done that for very, very large data tables where loading it up with millions and millions of records. And of course, each record has, hundreds and hundreds of characters. So it gets fairly verbose. When it's in when it's in there and you're accessing it from a field, it's actually really surprisingly really quick to load a field in that fashion and then display it in a web viewer.
Right. Yeah, I'd say that if you're doing that much data, I think virtual lists are probably outside of the bounds of what that requirement is. Virtual lists are really good for 1,000 lists or like showing a report. If you're building some sort of interface that needs to show that much data, virtual lists are probably not the way to do it.
Yeah, but you do have to be very careful of that 30,000 character limit for the global, because your virtual list will it won't tell you. It'll just happen.
Yeah.
Although maybe it'll break the JSON.
I was going to say you'd probably get malformed JSON,
which is good.
Right.
Yeah, I think techniques before the JSON was being used, you wouldn't know. You just
get a question mark or a
yeah.
Yeah, I think virtual lists really shine in like the custom report element. Like you're designing a layout that's FileMaker specific, and you need to customize this data in a very specific format. Virtual lists is just like seems like the best route to go.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I'd say this method, has its limitations on, how, like if you've got a solution that heavily utilizes virtual lists where users are doing reports left and right, I'd say that you'd probably want to extend it. Like, kind of like how that, Jacob, how that demo that you were showing a while back, how you could split it into multiple like window instances. Like that's a really good way to handle it. And I wouldn't put more than a couple of reports on the screen at one time, just in my opinion. But some people do that. Like some people want 5 windows open at once.
Yeah, it's not my method. It's Kevin Frank.
That's right.
It's like I want to say it's either 4 or 5 part demo now.
Oh yeah.
Just all about virtual lists. So.
And did you have any of those that you could share?
Yeah. I opened it, so I can share that one also.
Nice. Yeah, let's look at that.
That'd be good, because you're actually addressing an issue that we ran into when we were building this, in which the virtual list, we could only have that one virtual list. You couldn't have multiple virtual lists. If you tried to write to that same virtual, you can only have the one global. You can't have 5 globals in there all at once being referenced on using the same thing. So we'd have to build a separate virtual list for each time we wanted to display it. And then if you wanted to display both of them on the window at the same time, then it got drastically more complicated.
Yeah.
So going into like the same approach Joe was taking us in from the beginning for the table, the virtual list in this case is pretty simple. It's mainly just these two repeating calculated fields. He's using this special window method in his case. So in Kevin Frank's example, he's leveraging global variables that get uniquely defined via MD5 hash. So the variable is just like named per the window, right? And it allows you to decode the window name like super fast. So the global variable actually stores the collected data, right? And then that itself is just an index in the virtual list itself. And then we're just grabbing the JSON per that specific calculation, right? And he's just evaluating what that that key is.
Wow.
So, yeah, I had to wrap my brain around this method here, but it's I mean it's resourceful. Definitely one way to get it like slimmed down from having like multiple sets parsing, for each column specifically. This just happens in one go. And then the same, he's just grabbing summary data. And I believe this is similar to what you have done in the past stand-in for your sorting filters.
Yeah, that was based on Kevin Frank's sorting techniques.
So he's obviously leveraging this in one of his demos. So that's something that's in here as well. I'm not leveraging this in the solution I put it into, but it is in here. So in his case, like where we have just do customer summary. This is the virtual list here. We can kind of peek in to see what the data looks like in this case, and then we can look at the script. But as you can see, they're all just these. This is the window name, right? The window name that was hashed via an MD5 creates the global variable that ends up storing the single array, right? And then he's just generating as many globals as he needs to accumulate for the data. And there'd be no limit, right? He could have as many as he wanted in this case. But of course, you're creating all these globals. So the drawback is you probably don't want these to remain in memory,
Right.
which he has cleanup for.
Yeah.
So this max rep takes account of the actual count that was given for the virtual list or the globals themselves, and then he cleans them up based on the actual window name, right? And then when it was evaluated, so at the repetition. So if I close this, we'll see the cleanup run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he's grabbing all those the actual window hash, which would be the same for every single repeating.
Right.
And then on the fly, he has a special custom function that's running the iterator.
Is it like a while?
Yeah, it's just a while that's going through and clearing each one. I mean, it says clear repeating variable. That's exactly what the custom function's doing. But yeah, this one kind of has a little bit of overhead in the fact that he's relying on a couple custom functions, but they do simplify some of the methods, especially in like the collection process, and then in his case, cleanup, because he's not destroying just a singular global. He's having to do many. But let me see if I can just run.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. But what does the layout look like for the?
Sure. Yeah.
Is that just a row of global variables?
Yeah. So we can just see the repeating, right? So in this case, this is the text instance. They're both getting fed. They're both calculations. So both fields are getting fed the same data from the same row. and he can select whether or not it's being determined as a number evaluation or a text evaluation, which allows him to still have control over numbers or text, right? It doesn't, that gives him better control in formatting, right? Or actually even doing like later calculations on that.
Yeah.
Um,
So those are repeating fields as well. Is that what that is? The cell num?
yes. So cell num, this would be 2, right? We're just looking at it in a row across, but he's selecting the instance of the data type depending on what the data type is that he's displaying. So he's either got text or numbers, right? In this case, which does solve for pretty much everything you're going to show on a report, probably.
Yeah.
And
but
your header names, are those just like text, hard-coded text?
Those are hard-coded, yeah. So
Yeah.
he's not doing any collection for headers.
Okay.
It's all data specific, and there's no header collection happening whatsoever. So I guess the theory is like you're probably going to be designing these reports
Right.
in a specific way. So you're probably going to have to define what the headers look like anyways,
Yeah.
unless you're creating some kind of thing, something that's more dynamic,
Right.
then you probably want to include it.
Yeah. The other way allows for easy export to CSV, but this has a huge benefit of not having to have a table with a bunch of different records to reference.
Right.
Different fields to reference, not records. A bunch of different fields to reference. Yeah, because they're just doing them as repeating. Oh yeah, which makes sense, Joe. When we were looking at yours, I guess it could have easily just been repeating fields there too. There's no reason that they have to be
exactly. Yeah, they're
Yeah, and this is just a view at what the virtual list table has. I mean, these are all the calculations that are running on the repeating field, and then he's just the ID, like other instances, incrementing it starting from record 1, and he's pre-populating it with 10,000 records. Because he's working with a pretty big data set, but I know, Joe, you had a fancy way of generating records on the fly for ones that weren't in there. He's actually not doing anything like that. He's just like always making sure that there's enough data present in here.
Wow.
For the virtual list end. But then shrinking this list, when the report's actually generated. So only performing the find on the actual count of records.
Right.
Oh, okay. So he has a static 10,000 records, and then he has 10,000 records, and then just constrains the find to be those that have data.
Yeah. So we can look at the script here. He's got a bunch of preliminary data that he's collecting in the beginning about months and report information. And then he's controlling the window object, giving it size and stuff. Where he does the collection, this is where he's leveraging kind of another custom function. Let's see if I can identify it here. Yeah, so he's using the set var by name, which is actually creating the global of the window hash. Yeah.
Because you can do that in the let to define the global variables and the names of them in the let. So
that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just setting it.
Yeah.
But it allows them to just do it in one line, that one instance, and then that creates the global for that state. And he's just doing a loop. So this is just a loop collection.
I wonder if there's now that we're seeing this, an upper limit to the number of global variables that you can generate.
I don't know. He gets pretty in depth in those demos. I didn't read through like everything. But I know he was weighing out the advantages of using one direction versus another.
Yeah.
And why you might use this method. Basically, some of the key points that I grasped from his overview was the fact that the client we were working with needed to have simultaneous invoices open at the same time, pointing to the same virtual list.
Right.
and all the other instances of virtual lists weren't going to allow me to do that without the actual one closing or doing some kind of like
PDF.
some PDF implementation.
Yeah, but you could expand on this too if you wanted to do, like, this doesn't have to be window based. It could be portal based, or like you could just, for any virtual list that you want to display, provide a hash or some, unique value that you use for the naming of it. So you could have like 3 different virtual lists on a single layout display, all of them stored in global variables, and have them in without having the overhead of having to create 3 separate virtual lists.
Yeah, exactly. You just you have the management of cleaning up those globals, but they self-terminate after the solution closes, but you'd probably still want to make sure that you're not over allocating the memory.
Right.
Now, as we look at this, are these 2 separate window hashed global variables with the 2 windows open?
Yes.
In your tools. So
if we look, we can see that we'll have 2 distinct. So that one's E1B, this one's 336.
Oh, yeah.
We can see the 2 different global window hashes that were created to divide the context.
Yeah, so now you can populate window after window after window, and it doesn't matter. And you could actually just do some static values if you were going to display multiple virtual lists in a single layout, like Portal or something. I'm just imagining.
Yeah, so I mean, there's literally as many as you want here, but like that's the uniqueness of this approach. So
Right.
you can do the comparison if people are actively like working with Windows and trying to see like how this data stinks up in relation to it, another piece of information.
Yeah, that's huge. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the Kevin Frank demo. I did not create this. I take no credit for it, but I learned how to do it.
That's pretty cool.
Russell, if you want to share at one point the conversation was like, what does that look like with a giant data set for a report? Did you want to show that like process? I think it's pretty unique.
Yeah, so in this solution here, and they deal with, like this table here, we're viewing this in the WebDirect. But this one's got like 12,000 records. So when you click report, it will determine kind of which report you're seeing to start with, and then kind of build the WebViewer kind of definition based on the data set that we're looking at. So for each report type, there's different fields storing the text object that is the JSON data. And so
if you like
they have
select vessels.
Yeah, so they have a customizable report where they can kind of select which data source they're looking at. So if they wanted to go to vessels, we just changed what data set we're looking at, which this one has 6,000 entries. And then, they have a lot of their fields showing for filters, but the table kind of is down here. But yeah, so then if they went to the drills report, this then changes the data set again to the drills data, which, this is a lot more, 58,000.
I've saved that PDF just with the 58,000. Save the PDF. Yeah.
Have you? Oh, this works.
Yes.
Data set? Oh man.
Yes.
I'm nervous to touch that with 58,000 entries.
Click it.
Do it.
Yes. Do it.
All right.
Okay, well,
hopefully won't.
All right.
No, it should. It should. I mean, the 58,000 is a lot.
Yeah, it's already got loaded in the WebViewer, so it should.
That's the story of how Russell blew up the internet.
I broke the internet.
Oh no. This is taking much longer than I thought.
The famous line. I've got that tattooed on my forearm, actually.
What famous last words?
This is taking longer than
Or
I
is it taking
thought.
longer than I thought?
Or impulse control.
Or
I
we
wonder
should
how
get
many-
this didn't
I
this
wonder how
didn't
many
happen when I
pages that
tested.
is. Probably too much.
Probably
We should have tested with the
I mean, at
6,000
least
record
five,
one.
right?
Yeah.
Makes for good content.
How
Oh, you can
many-
still scroll
yeah.
though.
yeah, I wonder. I
Yeah,
mean,
you
I can
In
still
theory,
even
you should be able to still interact with the data.
you should still be able to. I mean, it would have already sent its process off to. It's basically calling like a separate routine that's running asynchronously, and then it's going to call the file to open a blob of the PDF. But it might be too big. I don't know if I tested it with the one that was 58,000, but I just wanted to say. Sorry, Russell. I may have froze it for you.
it's all right. Maybe I'll just simply wait. See
Hey,
what
the
happens.
easy part about this though is it's in the browser. You could just close the window, and it's you're
Yeah, it's not doing any.
locked up.
Yeah,
so
you're not locked up. You can exit and then come back, and it's not. It doesn't break anyone.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if I close the browser, if I close this window,
No.
will
If you just
kill
close the card window, you should be able to just close.
yeah,
will that kill
Yeah.
the process?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
so the
it-
process
it's
is
just
dead
in the,
now
in the WebViewer.
Yeah.
Okay.
because the instance
Okay.
of the web viewer is gone.
right.
Gotcha.
It's weird. In WebDirect, this is an iframe. So
Yeah, iframe. Right.
Yeah.
so this is also key in some of the benefits of using WebViewer for displaying this types of data and stuff. Unlike where FileMaker can have difficulty and lock up when it's trying to access data in the WebViewer, it's got the information that you're going to generate the PDF from already there. It's just if you're trying to calculate it too much and it starts to get out of control, you can just close it. None of it interferes with FileMaker.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's no cost on FileMaker to do this. You're actually just putting the pressure on whatever web instance is being used by FileMaker,
Mhm.
iframe or
Right.
can you test the PDF on that one? Don't you think?
Sure. Should I do the 12,000 or the vessels?
Either one. It's probably okay. I just the QI drills report. I don't know if I tested against that one. The full set, that is.
Oh,
This
see,
one
that
I
was
know
cool.
I tested against, but that's
That was
a
pretty
whole
quick.
lot more. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's 251 pages in
Wow.
a few seconds. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
that's
and how big is the PDF? That the size of the PDF is probably what's
yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's trying to store it to virtual mem on the browser side, and I think it's probably exceeded what it can
Right.
effectively store there.
Yeah.
But I should be air handling that, and I'm not.
They hopefully should never be doing a full record set download,
yeah.
but in the case that they do accidentally click it or what have you.
Yeah, we
Good that
probably
it's
should put like an error in there. I know it's going to exceed what is available.
Mhm.
Be like, we can't we can't process this down.
It's nice
I
too
don't
that the row sorts or the column sorts are really fast too, which is cool, which is nice.
Yeah. That's the benefit of having that all in JSON and just storing it or viewing it from that in that.
Yeah.
form.
Yeah, this isn't far off from the virtual list collection process.
Exactly. Yep.
So it's all being stored that way. I mean, if you wanted to translate into all this data into a virtual list, you already have it in that format.
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. All right. Well, that's it for today. Anybody have any last questions? Cool. All right.
Going to start use virtual list anyone?
Yeah, I'll probably be reviewing this meeting.
Yeah,
recording
right.
for sure.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk
Cool.
to you later.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you for spending your time with us at the FileMaker DevCast today. We hope you found something useful, something thought-provoking, and something to take into your own development approach. Things to help you be more productive and to allow you and your teams to get more done in less time. You can find us online at portagebay.com and filemakerdevcast.com. Also, follow us on our social media accounts at Portage Bay or at FMDevCast. Please let us know if we can help you or your company with modernizing your approaches and streamlining your workflow. We look forward to seeing you during the next DevCast.